Welcome to the Sleeping Times channel. Tonight, we bring you a story that will transport you directly to a time when going to the opera was much more than simply listening to music. It was participating in the most sophisticated and engaging social spectacle humanity has ever created. Imagine a world where every detail mattered, where the perfume you wore communicated your social standing, where every flick of the fan was a word in a secret language known only to the refined. And what if I told you that in the 18th century, a night at the opera involved all your senses in a way that our modern cultural experience has lost forever? Discover how our ancestors transformed a simple musical performance into a human symphony of refinement, where each person was simultaneously a spectator and a protagonist in a fascinating social drama. If you enjoy stories that move, surprise, and make you think about how we live today, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss anything. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. And tell me, have you ever had a cultural experience that engaged all your senses? And remember, throughout the week, we bring new adventures and incredible eras waiting to inspire you. Are you ready to embark on this journey through the gilded halls of the past? Then, make yourself comfortable, turn off the lights if you want a more immersive experience, and prepare to discover how a night at the opera was truly a living work of art. The October afternoon of 1758 in Lisbon was beginning to wane when the first stirrings of activity began in the city's noble houses. The golden sun filtered through the Venetian glass windows, creating dancing reflections on the damask silk-lined walls. It was opera day at the Tejo Opera House, and all of Portuguese high society was preparing for the week's most anticipated event. The aroma of rosewater and rice powder began to perfume the ladies' chambers, while servants hurried to and fro, preparing the clothes that had been carefully chosen days before. In the ladies' rooms, fine linen chemises were delicately donned over the skin, followed by whalebone corsets, which shaped the silhouette into an hourglass figure. The ritual of dressing was a ceremony in itself, with each piece being placed in a specific order. Silk stockings were pulled up to the knees and secured with embroidered garters, while satin shoes with curved heels patiently awaited by the bed. The soft rustle of fabric against fabric created an intimate symphony that anticipated the music that would be heard later. The skirts were true engineering marvels, supported by wire frames and boning that created impressive volumes. Layers upon layers of taffeta, brocade, and velvet overlapped, creating a magnificent visual effect. The chosen colors followed the strict rules of etiquette: cobalt blue for the younger ladies, burgundy for the matrons, and the always elegant emerald green for those who wished to draw attention without breaking protocol. Every fold was meticulously arranged, every clasp double-checked. The bodices were adjusted with millimeter precision, enhancing the décolletage elegantly yet respectfully. Brussels lace adorned the necklines, while satin ribbons formed delicate bows on the shoulders. Puffed sleeves were secured at the wrists with mother-of-pearl buttons, and small details in gold embroidery lent a touch of discreet luxury. The weight of the garments was considerable, but the ladies of the era were accustomed to bearing their attire like true armors of elegance. In the gentlemen's quarters, the ritual was no less elaborate. Linen shirts were impeccably white, with lace cuffs that extended beyond the coat sleeves. Tight silk or velvet breeches were carefully donned, followed by high stockings that reached the knees. Patent leather shoes with silver or gold buckles were polished until they shone like mirrors. Every masculine detail communicated status and refinement. The coats were true textile works of art, crafted from noble fabrics such as brocade, velvet, or silk. The colours followed French fashion: navy blue with gold embroidery, moss green with silver details, or the always elegant chocolate brown. The waistcoats, a fundamental piece of the male wardrobe, were richly embroidered and precisely fitted to the body. Mother of pearl, ivory, or precious metal buttons completed the ensemble with sophistication. Wigs were perhaps the most important element of the masculine look. Made of human hair or horsehair, they were powdered with white or greyish powder, creating a uniform and elegant effect. The process of putting on the wig was delicate. First, the natural hair was tied up and covered with a silk cap. Then the wig was carefully positioned and adjusted. Side curls framed the face, while the back was secured with a black velvet ribbon. Jewelry completed both the masculine and feminine looks. Pearl necklaces, diamond earrings, rings with precious stones, and ornate brooches were chosen not only for their beauty, but for what they communicated about the social standing of the wearer. The gleam of the gems in the candlelight would create a spectacle in itself during the night. Each piece had its history, often passed down from generation to generation, carrying family memories and traditions. Perfumes were applied generously, but following specific rules. Citrus cologne for men, floral essences for younger women, and more intense and woody fragrances for matrons. The aroma mingled with the rice powder and the oil from the candles, creating a unique olfactory atmosphere that defined the aristocratic environments of the era. Small crystal bottles held these precious essences, imported from France or produced in Portuguese convents. When the city bells announced the end of the afternoon, the preparations came to an end. Ivory and silk fans were chosen to match the gowns, kid gloves were carefully donned, and the final touches of rice powder were applied. The Venetian mirror reflected figures that seemed straight out of a painting, ready to participate in the grand social theatre that was a night at the opera. Anticipation hung in the air like a subtle perfume, promising hours of music, conversation, and, most importantly, the opportunity to see and be seen by Lisbon society. Carriages began to converge on the Tejo Opera House as the first stars appeared in the Lisbon sky. The rhythmic sound of horse hooves on the uneven cobblestones created an urban symphony that echoed off the building facades. Each carriage was a work of art on wheels, lacquered in vibrant colors, adorned with gilded family crests, and pulled by horses whose manes had been carefully combed and decorated with colorful ribbons. The gentle sway of the vehicles lulled their occupants, who savored the last moments of privacy before entering the grand social stage of the evening. The Tejo Opera House stood majestically in the urban landscape, its neoclassical facade illuminated by hundreds of torches that created a dramatic interplay of light and shadow. The marble columns seemed gilded in the flame light, while the statues adorning the entrance came alive with the movement of shadows. The building had been constructed following the most modern European architectural principles, rivaling the theatres of Paris and Vienna. Its imposing presence communicated the power and sophistication of the Portuguese court, a tangible symbol of the wealth arriving from the colonies. The approach to the theatre was a spectacle in itself. Dozens of carriages formed an orderly queue, each awaiting its turn to deposit its occupants at the main entrance. Uniformed footmen scurried back and forth, organizing arrivals and ensuring each family was received with due ceremony. The sound of wheels on the pavement mingled with the lively conversations escaping from the carriage windows, creating an atmosphere of growing anticipation. Street vendors took advantage of the crowd to offer flowers, sweets, and small souvenirs. When it was finally time to alight from the carriage, the ritual was executed with choreographic precision. First, the footman opened the door and extended a gloved hand to assist the ladies. Extreme care was taken. The voluminous dresses required delicate maneuvers to prevent them from creasing or getting soiled. satin shoes delicately touched the ground, while skirts were adjusted with graceful movements. Gentlemen descended next, adjusting their lace cuffs and checking that their wigs remained in place after the journey. The theatre entrance was a moment of pure theatricality. Each family made its entrance as if stepping onto a stage, aware that all eyes were upon them. Ladies walked with measured steps, their skirts swaying gently from side to side, while fans opened and closed in studied movements. Gentlemen offered their arms with elegance, their upright postures communicating confidence and distinction. The sound of heels on the marble of the hall created a hypnotic rhythm that echoed through the building's arches. The entrance hall was a spectacle of Baroque opulence. Bohemian crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, painted with mythological scenes, creating cascades of light that reflected on the gilded surfaces. Venetian mirrors multiplied the images of the guests, creating a kaleidoscope of colors and movements. The walls were clad in pink and white marble, interspersed with gilded pilasters supporting ornate arches. The polished marble floor reflected the lights like a tranquil lake, amplifying the sense of grandeur of the environment. Greetings and bows followed a strict yet graceful protocol. Each encounter was a small social dance. Ladies performed delicate curtsies, bending their knees slightly while keeping their backs straight. Gentlemen responded with precise inclinations of the head or body, depending on the social hierarchy involved. Fans were used as instruments of subtle communication. A specific movement could indicate interest, disapproval, or simply serve as an elegant barrier for more intimate conversations. Gloves were never removed, maintaining a symbolic barrier between people, even during the warmest greetings. The aroma of the environment was a complex and enveloping mixture. Individual perfumes blended, creating a unique collective fragrance. Floral notes of rose and jasmine from the ladies, citrus and woody essences from the gentlemen, the scent of candle wax illuminating every corner, and a subtle note of incense from the adjacent chapel to the theatre. The air was charged with anticipation and sophistication, each breath bringing a new olfactory layer that contributed to the magical atmosphere of the night. Conversations flowed in multiple languages, reflecting the cosmopolitan Lisbon society of the time. Portuguese, French, Italian, and Spanish mingled in an elegant murmur that echoed through the hall's arches. Topics ranged from the latest court news to comments about the opera to be performed. Subtle criticisms of others' attire were whispered behind fans, while compliments were distributed with the calculated generosity of those who knew they would be judged by the same measure. Every word was weighed, every comment had its purpose in the complex social network unfolding with each encounter. Slowly the crowd began to move towards the staircases leading to the boxes and the auditorium. The movement was fluid yet orderly, like a collective dance where each participant perfectly knew their role. Ladies delicately held their skirts to ascend the marble steps, while gentlemen offered discreet support. The sound of footsteps created a soft percussion that mingled with the murmur of conversations and the rustle of fabric. The light from the chandeliers accompanied the movement, creating plays of light and shadow that transformed each person into an almost ethereal figure, preparing to enter the true temple of art and society that awaited them inside the theatre. The interior of the Tejo Opera House revealed itself as an architectural jewel that rivaled the most famous European theatres. Upon crossing the main doors, spectators were immediately enveloped by an atmosphere of opulence that seemed to transport them to a celestial palace. The vaulted ceiling rose majestically, painted with frescoes depicting scenes from classical mythology, Apollo leading the Muses, Orpheus enchanting beasts with his lyre, and Euterpe, the muse of music, pouring inspiration upon mortals. Every brushstroke had been executed by Italian masters specially hired for the work, and the colors, ultramarine blue, gold, carmine red, seemed to vibrate in the light of hundreds of candles. The architecture followed the Italian horseshoe-shaped theatre model with 5 tiers of boxes rising towards the ceiling like gilded steps. Each box was a small private room, lined with red or royal blue velvet, with brocade curtains that could be closed for more intimate conversations. The balustrades were adorned with gilded carvings representing musical motifs, lyres, harps, trumpets, and stylized sheet music that created a rhythmic pattern along the entire structure. The wood used was Brazilian mahogany, polished to a mirror-like sheen that reflected the lights like a liquid surface. The chandeliers were true works of art in Bohemian crystal, each weighing hundreds of kilograms and containing thousands of prisms that fragmented the candlelight into dancing rainbows. The central chandelier suspended above the audience was particularly impressive, a cascade of crystal that seemed frozen in time, with golden arms extending like the branches of a celestial tree. When all the candles were lit, the theatre transformed into a cavern of light, where every surface reflected and multiplied the luminosity, creating an almost supernatural atmosphere. The parterre, reserved for wealthy merchants and the lesser nobility, was a sea of chairs upholstered in emerald green velvet. The floor was covered by an intricate Persian carpet, which muffled the sound of footsteps and created a sense of comfort and luxury. The side walls were decorated with niches housing marble statues representing famous composers: Monteverdi, Lully, Handel, and other masters of Baroque music. Between the statues, Venetian mirrors reflected the light from the chandeliers, creating the illusion that the space extended infinitely. The first-tier boxes reserved for the high nobility and the royal family were true miniature salons. Lined with damask silk in shades of gold and carmine, they contained furniture specially designed for the space: high-backed chairs upholstered in brocade, small tables to hold fans and opera glasses, and even a discreet sideboard where refreshments were served during intermissions. The curtains could be adjusted to control visibility, allowing occupants to observe without being observed, or to display themselves as the occasion demanded. The stage was a marvel of 18th century theatrical engineering. The proscenium was ornamented with gilded Corinthian columns, supporting an arch decorated with garlands of flowers carved in wood. The main curtain, a French tapestry depicting Parnassus, was a work of art in itself, with threads of real gold interwoven into the fabric. Behind the stage, a complex system of ropes, pulleys, and counterweights allowed for spectacular scenic changes, capable of transforming a forest into a palace or a temple into a marine grotto in a matter of minutes. The theatre's acoustics had been carefully calculated by the architects. The horseshoe shape and the materials used, wood, fabric, and marble, created a perfect resonance that allowed even a whisper on stage to be heard clearly in the last box. The vaulted ceiling functioned as a natural sound box, amplifying and distributing sound uniformly throughout the environment. Every musical note gained an almost magical quality, enveloping listeners in a complete sensory experience. The lighting was a spectacle in itself. In addition to the main chandeliers, hundreds of smaller candles were strategically placed in gilded sconces along the walls and in the boxes. Mirrors placed behind the candles doubled their luminosity, creating a diffuse and welcoming light effect. During the performance, some lights were gradually dimmed to direct attention to the stage, but never completely, as part of the spectacle was observing the audience's reactions and interactions. The golden light of the candles gave everyone present an almost angelic appearance, softening features and creating a dreamlike atmosphere. The aroma of the interior was a complex olfactory symphony. The wax from hundreds of candles mingled with the scent of noble woods, the velvet of the upholstery, and the personal fragrances of the spectators. There were also subtle notes of incense coming from the adjacent royal chapel, and the fresh aroma of flowers decorating the main boxes. Sachets of lavender and roses were discreetly placed in the upholstery to maintain a pleasant perfume, creating an atmosphere that was both luxurious and welcoming. When all the spectators finally settled into their places, the theatre presented a dazzling visual spectacle. The vibrant colors of the costumes contrasted with the golden and red tones of the decor, creating a human mosaic that was as beautiful as any work of art. The murmur of conversations echoed softly through the arches, mingling with the rustle of fans and the whisper of silks. It was as if the building itself breathed with the life of its occupants, transforming into a living organism where architecture, decoration, and society merged into a unique and unforgettable experience. In the boxes of the Tejo Opera House, a parallel spectacle unfolded, as fascinating as any drama that could be staged. Each box functioned as a small stage where Lisbon's most illustrious families displayed themselves in all their magnificence. The arrangement was not casual. It followed a rigid hierarchy that perfectly reflected the social structure of the time. The central boxes of the first tier were occupied by the royal family and dukes, while the side ones accommodated marquises and counts. Each position communicated status, power, and influence, creating a visual map of Portuguese aristocracy. In the royal box, lined with purple velvet embroidered with the Braganza coat of arms, etiquette reached its peak of refinement. Every movement was calculated, every gesture had meaning. The Queen, enveloped in a golden brocade gown that seemed to capture and reflect all the theatre's light, handled her ivory fan with movements that were true coded messages for the court. Beside her, the king observed both the stage and the audience with equal interest, for he knew that his presence transformed any event into a state ceremony. The princes and princesses, dressed with the same opulence but in softer tones, learned through observation the complex rules of royal protocol. In the adjacent boxes, the high nobility discreetly competed in elegance and sophistication. Duchesses displayed jewels that had belonged to queens, pearl necklaces from the Orient that told stories of epic voyages, Brazilian diamond earrings that reflected the wealth of the colonies. Their gowns were textile works of art, silks from Lyon, brocades from Florence, laces from Brussels, each piece chosen not only for its beauty, but for the message it conveyed about the wearer's wealth and good taste. The dukes, in turn, sported military decorations and honorary orders that gleamed on their velvet coats, each medal telling a story of service to the crown. Communication through fans had developed into a sophisticated language that allowed entire conversations without a single word. A closed fan resting on the heart meant, "You have my love," while the same fan opened and moved quickly indicated, "You are being very bold." Semi-open fans covering the face communicated shyness or disapproval, while slow, deliberate movements suggested romantic interest. The most experienced ladies were true masters of this art, capable of conducting entire marital negotiations through seemingly casual gestures with their silk and ivory fans. Opera glasses, small works of art in mother-of-pearl and gold, were essential instruments for social observation. Through them, it was possible to examine in detail the attire, jewels, and behavior of other spectators. A lady could assess the quality of a rival's pearls, a gentleman could discreetly admire a beautiful young woman in a distant box, and everyone could participate in the subtle game of observing and being observed that constituted a fundamental part of the operatic experience. The opera glasses were handled with elegance, becoming natural extensions of their users' refined gestures. Conversations in the boxes followed specific and appropriate themes for each moment of the evening. Before the opera began, international politics, the latest news from the French court, the progress of public works in Lisbon, and always, inevitably, the marriages, births, and scandals that stirred high society were discussed. During intermissions, comments turned to the quality of the music, the beauty of the sets, and the performance of the singers, but always tempered with observations about who was present, who was absent, and who was accompanied by whom. The ritual of visiting between boxes during intermissions was a complex and fascinating social dance. Gentlemen left their seats to greet ladies in other boxes, always following the appropriate social hierarchy. Unmarried young men took these opportunities to discreetly court their intended under the watchful eye of chaperones and parents. Conversations were brief but significant, every word weighed and every silence interpreted. Discreet gifts were exchanged, flowers, small poems, or simply cards with elegantly written messages. Fashion was a silent but fierce battlefield. Every new trend from Paris or Vienna was quickly adopted by the most influential ladies, creating waves of imitation that spread through the boxes like concentric ripples. The color of the season, the most modern cut, the most luxurious fabric, everything was noticed, commented on, and judged. Seamstresses and tailors gained or lost reputation based on the success of their creations at these public events. A well-dressed lady could influence the fashion of the entire court, while a misjudgment could result in months of social ostracism. Perfumes also played a part in this subtle competition. Each family had its characteristic fragrances, often specially created by French perfumers or produced in Portuguese convents famous for their essences. The aroma emanating from each box told a story. Roses for youth and innocence, jasmine for mature sensuality, lavender for elegant discretion, and amber for mystery and sophistication. The mixture of these perfumes created a unique olfactory atmosphere that defined each social event. At the end of the first act, when the lights were partially relit for the intermission, the theatre transformed into a human kaleidoscope of colors, movements, and sounds. It was the moment when society displayed itself in all its glory, a spectacle of elegance, power, and refinement that rivaled any drama staged on the main stage. Every person present knew they were participating in an ancient social ritual where art served as a backdrop for the true performance, the exhibition of civilization at its highest degree of sophistication and beauty. The olfactory universe of the Tejo Opera House was a complex composition that engaged the senses in an almost hypnotic way. Each breath brought a new aromatic layer that contributed to the unique sensory experience of the night. The dominant scent was that of beeswax from the hundreds of candles illuminating the environment, a sweet and welcoming aroma that mingled with the more sophisticated fragrances of the spectators. The candles, imported from France and made with special waxes, burned with a steady flame that not only illuminated but delicately perfumed the air with notes of honey and wild flowers. Personal perfumes created an olfactory symphony that varied with the movement of the audience. Ladies wore elaborate colognes with floral essences, rose water distilled in the convents of Alcobaça, jasmine essence brought from the east by the India-run ships, and delicate violet fragrances that were the latest Parisian fashion. Each perfume was applied at strategic points, wrists, behind the ears, on the décolletage, creating an aromatic aura that intensified with body heat and the movement of fans. Matrons preferred more intense and woody fragrances with notes of sandalwood and patchouli that communicated maturity and sophistication. Gentlemen were not far behind in terms of fragrances. Their colognes were predominantly citrusy, with notes of bergamot, Sicilian lemon, and bitter orange that created a sense of freshness and virility. Some preferred more exotic fragrances with hints of oriental spices, cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, that recalled Portuguese maritime adventures and lent an air of mystery and worldliness. Tobacco also contributed to the masculine aromatic profile. Finely ground snuff, flavored with floral essences, was delicately inhaled from small gold and mother-of-pearl boxes. During intermissions, uniformed servants circulated through the boxes offering refreshments that added new dimensions to the night's sensory panorama. Silver trays carried crystal goblets containing flavored waters with rose petals, fresh mint, or lemon slices. Port wines, served in small portions in bohemian crystal glasses, exuded complex aromas of ripe fruits and spices. French liqueurs, Chartreuse, Benedictine, Cointreau, were offered to ladies in tiny glasses that looked like liquid jewels. The sweets served during intermissions were true confectionery works of art that delighted both the eyes and the palate. Small French macarons, colored like jewels, melted in the mouth, releasing flavors of almond, rose, and violet. Chocolates filled with liqueurs were presented in velvet boxes, each a small explosion of flavor, combining Belgian chocolate with French spirits. Candied fruits, figs, pears, citrons shone like edible gems, offering crunchy textures and intensely concentrated flavors. Hot beverages also had their special place in the opera's gastronomic experience. Hot chocolate, prepared with Venezuelan cocoa and flavored with cinnamon and vanilla, was served in Sèvres porcelain cups that delicately warmed the ladies' gloved hands. Turkish coffee, strong and aromatic, was offered to gentlemen in small oriental porcelain cups accompanied by small cubes of crystallized sugar. Chinese tea, an exotic novelty, was served in blue and white porcelain sets that told stories of distant lands. The aroma of fresh flowers permeated the entire environment, creating an enchanted garden atmosphere. White and red roses, carefully arranged in crystal vases, exuded their classic fragrance that mingled with the more delicate scent of violets and the intense aroma of jasmines. Small lavender bouquets, discreetly placed in the boxes, released their calming essence with every movement of the air. Rose petals were scattered on the carpets, releasing their fragrance with each step of the spectators. The fabrics also contributed to the night's aromatic universe. Silks, often perfumed with floral waters during the dyeing process, exuded subtle fragrances that intensified with body heat. Velvets, treated with aromatic oils to maintain their softness, released woody and musky notes. Laces, often stored in chests with lavender and rose sachets, carried these delicate fragrances that mingled with personal perfumes. The theatre's architecture itself contributed to the olfactory experience. The noble woods, mahogany, rosewood, Brazil wood, exuded their natural fragrances that intensified with the heat of the candles. The marble, polished with aromatic waxes, released mineral notes that mingled with the organic perfumes. Even the gilded metals, treated with special oils to maintain their shine, contributed subtle but perceptible notes to the complex aromatic composition of the environment. As the night progressed, all these aromas merged into a unique and unrepeatable fragrance that defined that specific experience. It was a collective perfume that could not be reproduced or bottled, but which remained in the memory of all present as the olfactory essence of a perfect night at the opera. Each breath was a small sensory journey that complemented the music, the architecture, and the company, creating a synesthetic experience that engaged all senses in a perfect harmony of refined and civilized sensations. When the lights finally dimmed partially and the conductor raised his baton, a respectful silence descended upon the theatre like a velvet veil. But this silence was relative, for 18th century opera did not demand the absolute attention we know today. The music functioned more as an elegant soundtrack for the grand social spectacle that continued to unfold in the boxes. The first notes of the overture echoed through the gilded arches, creating an atmosphere of refinement that elevated all social interactions to an almost celestial level. The orchestra, composed of musicians from all over Europe, executed each passage with the precision of a Swiss clockwork mechanism. The opera chosen for the night was Metastasio's Artaserse, with music by Johann Adolf Hasse, a work that masterfully combined drama, romance, and visual spectacle. The arias were moments of pure vocal virtuosity, where the singers demonstrated their technical skills through elaborate ornamentations and improvised cadenzas that made the audience sigh with admiration. During these more spectacular passages, even conversations in the boxes temporarily ceased, and all opera glasses turned towards the stage. It was the moment when the music truly captured general attention, creating an aesthetic communion among all present. Recitatives, on the other hand, were treated as elegant background music. During these narrative passages, conversations in the boxes resumed in discreet whispers, fans began to move again in coded gestures, and gallants took the opportunity to whisper sweet nothings into the ears of their ladies. The music created an acoustic intimacy that allowed for private conversations even in public, as the sound of the orchestra masked the words exchanged between spectators. It was a sophisticated form of public privacy that defined the social experience of 18th century opera. The singers were true international stars, many of them Italian castrati whose fame transcended borders. Their voices of superhuman purity and agility were capable of executing passages of impressive technical complexity. When a famous castrato performed a particularly difficult aria, the entire theatre surrendered to his art, and spontaneous applause interrupted the music at moments of exceptional virtuosity. It was common for popular arias to be repeated at the audience's request, transforming the opera into a partially improvised and interactive event. Female sopranos, though less famous than the castrati, possessed a vocal sensuality that particularly captivated the male audience. Their voices, crystalline and expressive, were capable of conveying emotions with an intensity that made ladies sigh and gentlemen lean forward in their boxes. During love arias, it was possible to observe couples exchanging meaningful glances, using the music as a vehicle for their own romantic emotions. The opera functioned as an emotional catalyst that intensified existing feelings among spectators. The orchestra, positioned in a specially constructed pit in front of the stage, was a visual spectacle in itself. The musicians, dressed in elegant livery, handled instruments that were true works of art: Stradivarius and Guarneri violins, exotic wood flutes, ebony oboes, and a gilded harpsichord that gleamed in the candlelight. The conductor, an imposing figure with his powdered wig and embroidered coat, led the orchestra with gestures that were both precise and theatrical, transforming the conducting into a visual performance complementary to the music. During romantic duets, the theatre transformed into a temple of courtly love. The intertwined voices of the singers created harmonies that seemed to float through the air like musical perfumes, enveloping spectators in an atmosphere of refined romanticism. It was common to see ladies closing their eyes to better savor the music, while gentlemen took advantage of these moments for whispered declarations or to offer small gifts, flowers, poems, or jewels, that were accepted with discreet smiles and graceful movements of the fans. The choruses, composed of carefully selected male and female voices, created moments of epic grandeur that made the entire theatre vibrate. During battle or celebration scenes, their voices rose in complex harmonies that seemed to make the very walls of the theatre resonate. These moments were seized by spectators for more open demonstrations of approval, enthusiastic applause, shouted bravos from the boxes, and even flowers thrown towards the stage in gestures of spontaneous admiration. Music also served as a temporal marker for the night's social rituals. Certain arias were traditionally associated with specific moments. During the opening aria, it was customary to make the last courtesy visits between boxes. During duets, it was the appropriate time for romantic exchanges, and during the grand final choruses, everyone prepared for the greetings and farewells that would mark the end of the night. The opera functioned as a social clock that organized and gave rhythm to all the human interactions occurring simultaneously. As the music unfolded throughout the night, it created an emotional soundtrack that intensified all the sensory experiences of the theatre. Each chord resonated not only in the ears, but seemed to vibrate through the fabrics, reflect in the crystals of the chandeliers, and mingle with the perfumes in the air. The music transformed the theatre into a gigantic instrument where every person present became part of a broader human symphony, creating a total aesthetic experience that engaged all senses in a perfect harmony of art, society, and refined sensuality. When the main curtain slowly descended at the end of the first act, marking the beginning of the first intermission, the theatre instantly transformed into an elegant hive of social activity. The lights were gradually relit, revealing a human spectacle as elaborate as any drama staged on the main stage. It was as if a second play began, where each spectator simultaneously became an actor and an audience in a complex and fascinating social drama. The sound of conversations, which had been kept respectful whispers during the performance, now blossomed into a melodious murmur that echoed through the gilded arches of the theatre. The boxes opened like blooming flowers, their curtains being drawn back to reveal their occupants in all their magnificence. It was the moment when ladies discreetly adjusted their hairstyles, checked that their jewels remained in place, and prepared their fans for the social dance that was about to begin. Gentlemen smoothed their powdered wigs, adjusted their lace cuffs, and prepared for the courtesy visits that protocol required. Every movement was calculated, every gesture had its purpose in the complex social choreography that defined the opera's intermissions. The ritual of visits between boxes followed a rigid but gracefully executed hierarchy. Gentlemen of lower social standing were the first to move, heading to the boxes of more illustrious families to pay their respects. Each visit was a small ceremony in itself: the respectful approach, the appropriate bow to the host's status, the exchange of carefully chosen words, and the elegant departure that did not linger beyond what was appropriate. It was a social dance where every step was known and respected by all participants. During these intermissions, the theatre staff sprang into action with the precision of a well-trained army. Dressed in impeccable livery in the colours of the royal house, blue and gold, they circulated through the boxes carrying silver trays with delicate refreshments. Perfumed waters served in fine crystal glasses, fortified wines in goblets that looked like liquid jewels, and small candied sweets that were true edible works of art. Each service was executed with discreet bows and silent movements that did not disturb ongoing conversations. Conversations during intermissions followed specific themes appropriate for each moment of the social season. Comments on the quality of the music were obligatory, but always tempered with observations about the society present. "The soprano is in excellent form tonight, don't you think?" Could be followed by, "And what a beautiful necklace the Countess of Villarreal is wearing." It was an elegant way to blend artistic appreciation with social observation, demonstrating both cultural refinement and awareness of social hierarchies. Young, unmarried individuals took advantage of these intermissions for the courtship rituals that were essential to the social life of the time. Under the watchful eye of chaperones and parents, gallants approached their intended with discreet gifts: small bouquets of flowers, handwritten poems on perfumed paper, or small jewels that communicated serious intentions. Young ladies responded with calculated smiles, graceful movements of their fans, and carefully chosen words that could encourage or discourage the attentions received. Fashion was an inexhaustible topic of conversation during intermissions. Each new dress was analyzed and commented upon: the quality of the fabric, the originality of the cut, the suitability of the colors to the wearer's age and status. What a beautiful brocade the Marquise chose. It must be from Lyon. Or, that emerald green color is very much in vogue in Paris, were typical comments that demonstrated knowledge of European trends and aesthetic judgment. It was a sophisticated form of feminine competition that unfolded through seemingly sincere compliments. Perfumes were also a subject of attention and comment during these intermissions. A particularly well-chosen fragrance could generate discreet compliments. "What a delightful essence you are wearing, is it French?" It was common for perfume recipes to be exchanged between close friends and for new fragrances to be discreetly tested during these social gatherings. The aroma emanating from each box told a story about the refinement and international connections of its occupants. Court news circulated rapidly during intermissions, transforming the theatre into a center of social information. Births, marriages, appointments to important positions, and even discreet scandals were communicated through elegant whispers. "Did you hear that the Count of Obidos was appointed ambassador to Vienna?" Or "They say the Marquis of Frontera's daughter is betrothed to the Duke of Aveiro's son," were the kind of information that quickly spread through the boxes, keeping everyone updated on the movements of high society. As the theatre bell announced the end of the intermission, a final wave of activity swept through the boxes. Quick but elegant farewells were exchanged, last greetings were presented, and everyone returned to their seats with the grace of dancers performing the final steps of a ballet. The lights were gradually dimmed, conversations respectfully ceased, and the theatre prepared for the second act. But the memory of the intermissions remained, the words exchanged, the meaningful glances, the small social dramas that had unfolded in the boxes, creating an additional layer of meaning and emotion that enriched the entire experience of the night at the opera. As the night progressed and the opera approached its dramatic climax, the theatre's lighting acquired almost magical qualities that transformed the entire experience into something transcendental. The hundreds of candles illuminating the space had burned for hours, creating a more intimate and welcoming atmosphere. The melted wax formed small golden tears that dripped down the silver candelabras, while the flames danced softly, creating plays of light and shadow that gave life to the marble statues and gilded ornaments decorating the theatre. The Bohemian crystal chandeliers, with their thousands of facets, fragmented the candlelight into dancing rainbows that projected onto the silk-lined walls. Every movement of the air caused by the collective breathing of the spectators or the rustle of fans made the crystals tinkle softly, creating a visual music that complemented the opera. The light reflected in the crystals created kaleidoscopic patterns on the painted ceiling, making the mythological figures seem to come alive and move, as if the painted gods and muses were truly watching the performance from their golden Olympus above. In the boxes, the softer light of individual candles created an atmosphere of intimacy that contrasted with the grandeur of the surroundings. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the spectators' faces, softening features and giving everyone an almost ethereal beauty. The ladies looked like paintings by Renaissance masters, with their pearly skin glowing softly in the golden light, while their jewels captured and reflected every ray of light like miniature stars. The gentlemen, with their powdered wigs and embroidered coats, assumed poses worthy of aristocratic portraits, each aware of how the light favored their appearance. The shadows created by candlelight had a unique quality that electric light could never reproduce. They were soft, gradual shadows that blended into one another, creating an atmosphere of mystery and romance. In the more secluded corners of the boxes, young couples took advantage of these dim areas for more intimate glances and whispered words that did not reach the ears of chaperones. The very architecture of the theatre, with its niches and recesses, created small havens of shadow where more private conversations could occur without breaking public decorum. The stage was a universe apart in terms of lighting. Hundreds of candles, strategically placed in the wings and rigging, created a dramatic light that highlighted every gesture of the singers and every detail of the scenery. The costumes, specially made to shine in candlelight, were adorned with sequins, gold embroidery, and fabrics that reflected the light spectacularly. When a soprano performed a particularly emotional aria, the light seemed to emanate from her very being, creating an almost divine aura that intensified the emotional impact of her performance. The painted backdrops gained depth and realism under the scenic lighting of the era. Landscapes that would appear as simple canvas paintings during the day transformed into convincing worlds in the flickering candlelight. Painted gardens seemed to whisper with imaginary breezes, stage palaces acquired the majesty of real constructions, and even the painted clouds on the cyclorama seemed to float gently in the artificial sky of the theatre. It was a magic that depended entirely on the special quality of candlelight to work. During the opera's most dramatic scenes, specialized technicians manipulated the lighting to create spectacular effects. Candles were gradually extinguished to simulate dusk or quickly relit to represent dawn. Movable mirrors redirected light to create moonlight or sunbeam effects, while translucent fabrics were used to filter light and create dreamlike atmospheres. These effects, though simple by modern standards, were revolutionary for the time and elicited exclamations of admiration from the audience. The smoke from the candles, mixed with the perfumes of the spectators and the aroma of the flowers decorating the theatre, created a unique olfactory atmosphere that intensified as the night progressed. This aromatic haze, almost imperceptible but always present, contributed to the feeling of being in a world apart, separated from everyday reality by a sensory barrier that enveloped everyone present in a collective experience of beauty and refinement. In the Venetian mirrors adorning the theatre walls, the candlelight multiplied infinitely, creating the illusion that the space extended far beyond its real dimensions. Each mirror reflected not only the light, but also fragments of the scenes unfolding in the boxes. A smile captured here, an elegant gesture there, creating a visual mosaic that was constantly renewed by the movements of the spectators. It was as if the theatre itself were a gigantic kaleidoscope where every movement created new combinations of light, color, and form. As the opera neared its end, and many candles had almost completely burned down, the lighting acquired an even more intimate and welcoming quality. Shadows deepened, creating more dramatic contrasts between light and darkness. The faces of the spectators, illuminated by the golden, wavering light, seemed to emerge from the gloom like characters from a Baroque dream. It was at this moment that the magic of 18th century opera reached its peak, when music, architecture, society, and light itself merged into a total aesthetic experience that would forever remain etched in the memory of all present, like a golden treasure kept in the most intimate vault of their recollections. The third act of the opera marked the moment of greatest intensity, both musical and social, of the evening. It was when all dramatic plots converged towards their resolution, and simultaneously when the social tensions and expectations that had accumulated throughout the night finally found their conclusion. Hasse's music reached its most virtuosic moments with arias of impressive technical complexity that demanded the utmost skill from the singers. The entire theatre seemed to vibrate with the emotional intensity emanating from the stage, creating an electric atmosphere that captivated everyone present. The principal soprano, interpreting the role of Mandaine, performed her final aria with a passion that made the audience collectively sigh. Her voice, crystalline and powerful, ascended in dizzying scales that seemed to defy the very laws of vocal physics. Each note was a small work of art, adorned with flourishes and cadenzas that demonstrated years of rigorous training. In the boxes, ladies could be seen closing their eyes to better savor the music, while gentlemen leaned forward, completely absorbed by the performance. It was a moment of aesthetic communion where all social differences seemed temporarily suspended by the power of art. The castrato who played Artaserse offered a performance of technical virtuosity that bordered on the supernatural. His voice, with an agility and purity impossible for natural voices, executed coloratura passages that made the audience erupt in spontaneous applause in the middle of the arias. It was common for certain passages to be repeated at the audience's request, transforming the opera into a partially improvised event. During these moments of pure virtuosity, even the most intimate conversations in the boxes ceased, and all opera glasses turned towards the stage in reverent admiration. In the boxes, the musical climax served as a catalyst for emotions that had been carefully controlled throughout the night. Young couples took advantage of the music's emotional intensity for more meaningful glances, whispered words with greater urgency, and gestures that communicated feelings that social protocol normally did not allow to be openly expressed. The music functioned as a universal emotional language that allowed the expression of feelings that would otherwise remain repressed by social conventions. The more sensitive ladies were visibly affected by the opera's dramatic intensity. Discreet tears were wiped away with lace handkerchiefs, deep sighs accompanied the most emotional passages, and fans were fluttered more frequently to disguise emotion. It was considered a sign of refinement and sensibility to be visibly moved by the music, and those who remained completely impassive were discreetly criticized for a lack of artistic soul. The ability to be emotionally affected by art was seen as a mark of superior education and a refined nature. During the grand final duet between the protagonists, the entire theatre seemed suspended in a moment of pure musical magic. The two voices intertwined in complex harmonies that created a third, phantom voice, a result of the building's perfect acoustic resonance. It was a moment of transcendence where architecture, music, and human emotion merged into an experience that seemed to touch the divine. In the boxes, couples discreetly drew closer, using the music as an excuse for a greater intimacy that would be unthinkable in other circumstances. The orchestra musicians, after hours of impeccable performance, demonstrated a concentration and precision that bordered on perfection. Each instrument contributed to a sound tapestry of impressive complexity, where main melodies and secondary counterpoints intertwined like golden threads in a musical brocade. The conductor, subtly sweating under his powdered wig, led with gestures that were both precise and inspired, transforming the conducting into a visual performance that complemented the music. The ensemble scenes, where all the principal singers gathered on stage for the final numbers, created moments of epic grandeur that made the entire theatre vibrate. Their combined voices created harmonies of such richness and complexity that they seemed to make the very walls resonate. During these moments, it was common for the audience to spontaneously rise in their boxes, applauding and shouting "Bravo!" with an enthusiasm that contrasted with the elegant restraint that had characterized the rest of the evening. The stage lighting achieved its most spectacular effects during the opera's climax. Hundreds of candles were manipulated by invisible technicians to create effects of storms, dawn, or divine apotheosis that left the audience awestruck. When the protagonist was finally reunited with her true love, a cascade of golden light flooded the stage, created by mirrors and lenses that concentrated and redirected the candlelight. It was an effect that depended entirely on the technology of the time, but which lost nothing in emotional impact compared to any modern effect. As the opera approached its triumphant conclusion, an atmosphere of growing anticipation filled the theatre. It was the moment when all plots were resolved, all loves were realized, and all virtue was rewarded. following the conventions of 18th century serious drama. But it was also the moment when the social evening neared its end, and all the small dramas, romances, and intrigues that had unfolded in the boxes also needed to find their resolution. The music served as a soundtrack for both outcomes, creating a symphony of emotions that encompassed both the fictional characters on stage and the real people in the audience in a total and unforgettable aesthetic experience. When the last notes of the opera echoed through the gilded arches of the theatre and the main curtain descended for the final time, a moment of reverent silence filled the air before exploding into enthusiastic applause that seemed to make the very building vibrate. It was the moment of apotheosis, when all the musical and social tension accumulated throughout the night finally found its release in a collective explosion of approval and emotion. The singers, sweating and radiant under their elaborate wigs and costumes, returned to the stage to receive the ovations they had earned with their virtuosic performances. Flowers began to fly from the boxes towards the stage like a perfumed rain of approval. White and red roses, carefully chosen during the day for this moment, were thrown by the ladies with graceful gestures that were almost as theatrical as the opera itself. Some more enthusiastic gentlemen even threw their own boutonnieres, while others offered small pouches of gold coins as a tangible demonstration of their approval. It was a ritual of gratitude that transformed the end of the opera into a collective celebration of art and beauty. In the boxes, farewells began with the same elaborate ceremony that had characterized the entire night. But now there was a subtle urgency, for everyone knew that the magic of the night was coming to an end, and that they would soon return to the daily reality of their lives. The last greetings were exchanged with greater emotional intensity. The last whispered words carried promises of future encounters, and the last meaningful glances were exchanged between young couples who had used the night to deepen their mutual acquaintance. The ritual of donning coats and cloaks was executed with the same choreographic precision that had characterized the arrival. Servants silently appeared in the boxes carrying the heavy velvet and ermine cloaks that would protect their masters from the chill of the Lisbon dawn. Ladies were carefully wrapped in their fur-lined capes, while gentlemen adjusted their travel coats over their formal attire. It was a gradual transformation from theatrical figures back into ordinary people, though still magnificently dressed. The descent down the marble staircases was a final spectacle of collective elegance. Hundreds of people moved in an orderly procession, their clothes rustling softly, their jewels gleaming in the light of the chandeliers, creating a human river of colors and textures that flowed gracefully towards the exit. Conversations continued in low tones, but now revolved around the performance that had just ended. Praise for the singers, comments on the quality of the orchestra, and inevitably observations about who had been present and how they had behaved. In the entrance hall, now serving as an exit hall, final greetings were exchanged with a formality that masked the reluctance to see the night end. It was the moment for discreet invitations for future meetings, thanks for the company during the evening, and promises of correspondence that would keep alive the social contacts established during the opera. Calling cards were discreetly exchanged, small gifts were offered as souvenirs of the night, and plans for future social events were whispered among intimate friends. Carriages waited in an orderly queue outside the theatre, their coachmen having spent the night in nearby taverns warming themselves with wine and conversations about their employers. The horses, covered with blankets to protect them from the night cold, swayed impatiently, eager to return to their warm stables. The carriage lanterns created small islands of golden light in the darkness of the street, while uniformed footmen scurried back and forth, organizing the departure of each family according to their position in the social hierarchy. Entering the carriages was executed with the same ceremonial care as the arrival, but now there was a different quality in the air. The excitement of anticipation had been replaced by the satisfaction of the lived experience. Ladies carefully settled into their seats, adjusting their voluminous skirts and pulling their cloaks tighter against the cold of the early morning. Gentlemen checked that their wigs remained in place and that their lace cuffs had not wrinkled during the long night. As the carriages began to move, carrying their occupants back to their residences through the dark streets of Lisbon, conversations inside the vehicles took on a more intimate and reflective tone. It was time to process the night's experiences, who had been seen with whom, what new romances seemed to be blossoming, what social alliances had been strengthened or weakened. Ladies commented on the outfits they had admired, gentlemen discussed the technical aspects of the music, and everyone shared their impressions of the society that had gathered on that special night. The rhythmic sound of horse hooves on the cobblestone streets created a soft percussion that lulled the carriage occupants into a kind of post-operatic trance. Many closed their eyes and let the melodies they had heard during the night echo in their minds, reliving the most emotional moments of the performance. It was common for particularly beautiful arias to be hummed softly, creating small private concerts inside the carriages that prolonged the musical experience even after the opera ended. When they finally arrived at their residences, illuminated by torches that had been kept lit throughout the night, the spectators alighted from their carriages carrying much more than just the memories of a night of entertainment. They brought stories to tell, impressions to process, and a sense of having participated in something larger than themselves, a collective ritual of civilization and refinement that connected them not only to each other, but to an ancient cultural tradition that transformed the simple act of listening to music into a transcendental experience of beauty, society, and art. As we contemplate this night at the 18th century opera, we are transported to a world where art was not merely entertainment, but the very fabric that united society in a collective experience of beauty and refinement. It was an era when every gesture held meaning, every detail communicated status, and every moment was carefully choreographed to create a human symphony of elegance and sophistication. The 18th century opera teaches us that the true cultural experience transcends the simple act of listening to music. It was a total event that engaged all senses, sight dazzled by the gilded architecture and magnificent costumes, smell enveloped by refined perfumes and the aroma of wax candles, touch caressed by noble fabrics and luxurious textures, and obviously, hearing transported by angelic voices and celestial music. More than that, the opera functioned as a mirror of society, reflecting not only its hierarchies and conventions, but also its dreams and aspirations. It was a place where everyday reality was temporarily suspended in favor of an idealized world where beauty, virtue, and love always triumphed. It was a civilized refuge where humanity could contemplate its highest artistic and social achievements. Today, when we attend an opera or any cultural event, we rarely experience this sensory and social totality that characterized the 18th century. Our experience is often fragmented. We focus on the music, but miss the social rituals. We appreciate the performance, but ignore the architecture. We hear the voices, but do not smell the perfumes. Perhaps we can learn from our 18th century ancestors the art of living culture as a complete and transformative experience. The deepest lesson from this night at the opera is that true civilization resides not only in the creation of beautiful art, but in the ability to create collective rituals that elevate the human spirit and connect people in shared experiences of transcendence. It was a world where every detail mattered, where beauty was cultivated as a virtue, and where art served as a bridge between the mundane and the divine. May we, in our modern times, rediscover this capacity to transform cultural events into total experiences that nourish not only our ears, but our entire soul, connecting us to one another through shared beauty and the collective experience of the sublime.